The sun wasn't even up when Elaine Johnson's alarm rang at 4:30 a.m. She reached over quickly to silence it, not wanting to wake her teenage son in the next room. Their apartment walls were thin, and he needed his sleep. She rubbed her tired eyes, took a deep breath, and swung her legs over the side of the bed. Another day was beginning, just like the thousands before it. The mirror showed the same face she'd known for 45 years, kind brown eyes with crow's feet at the corners from years of putting on a brave smile. She splashed cold water on her face and pulled her hair back into a neat bun. No time for makeup. No need for it either, since most people at Westfield University never really looked at her anyway. By 5:15, Elaine was already on the bus heading to campus. She sat quietly, watching the city wake up outside the window. Other passengers dozed or stared at their phones. A few wore uniforms like hers, the invisible workforce that kept the world running while others slept. "Morning, Earl," she said, nodding to the security guard as she swiped her ID at the staff entrance of Westfield's main building. The prestigious private university sprawled across 50 acres of perfectly manicured lawns and historic buildings. Tuition cost more than Elaine made in 2 years. "Another day, another dollar, right, Elaine?" Earl smiled, handing her the master keys. "Something like that," she replied, heading to the janitor's closet to gather her supplies. Westfield's hallways were peaceful at this hour. Elaine moved from classroom to classroom, emptying trash cans, wiping down desks, and mopping floors. She worked methodically, taking pride in how the rooms transformed under her care. Sometimes she paused to glance at the complex equations left on whiteboards or flip through an abandoned textbook. Nobody would believe how much she understood of what she read. By 8 a.m., students began trickling in. Elaine became invisible then. They walked past her as if she were just another piece of furniture. Young men and women in expensive clothes, carrying designer bags, laughing about parties and complaining about assignments they'd completed on laptops that cost more than her monthly rent. "Excuse me," Elaine said softly as she tried to navigate her cleaning cart past a group blocking the hallway. They continued their conversation, not even glancing her way. She waited patiently until one boy finally noticed and moved aside without acknowledging her. In the student lounge, Elaine quietly collected abandoned coffee cups and food wrappers. A group of senior students lounged on the sofas, their feet up on tables she'd polished that morning. "I still can't believe my dad expects me to give a speech at graduation," said a girl with long red hair. "Like, hasn't he paid enough to this place? Now I have to work for it too." Her friends laughed. "Just make the cleaning lady write it," joked another student. "It's not like she's doing anything important." They didn't lower their voices or check if Elaine could hear them. In their world, people like her didn't really exist except to serve them. Elaine kept her face neutral as she had learned to do over 8 years working at Westfield. The comments stung, but she'd heard worse. What these students didn't know, couldn't imagine, was that after finishing her shift, she would eat a quick lunch in the staff room, then head to the campus library to study during her break. Her worn backpack contained textbooks and carefully organized notes. While the rich kids partied at night, Elaine attended evening classes 3 times a week. A benefit for university staff that she had quietly taken advantage of for years. When other janitors used their breaks to rest their feet or chat in the break room, Elaine was studying, writing papers, or meeting with professors who knew her as Ms. Johnson, the brilliant, non-traditional student. None of them connected her with the quiet janitor in the gray uniform. And that's exactly how Elaine wanted it, for now. The student center buzzed with excitement on Friday evening. Elaine pushed her cleaning cart past groups of laughing students. Graduation was just weeks away, and the senior class couldn't talk about anything else. Elaine kept her head down, focusing on her work as usual. "I can't believe we're almost done," a tall young man in a designer sweater said loudly to his friends. "My father's already secured me that position at his firm." He lounged on a leather sofa, one arm draped casually over the back. "Of course he did," replied his friend, rolling her eyes. "The rest of us actually had to interview, you know." Elaine moved carefully around them, wiping down tables and picking up trash. The students continued talking as if she weren't there. She'd grown used to being invisible, but tonight something felt different. Maybe it was because her own graduation was approaching too, a secret she'd kept close to her heart. As she reached to empty a trash can near their group, Elaine accidentally knocked it over. Crumpled papers and coffee cups spilled across the floor. The sudden noise made the students turn. For once, they actually looked at her. "Well, well," said the young man with the designer sweater, "looks like someone's having trouble with the difficult task of emptying trash." His friends laughed, and Elaine felt her cheeks grow hot as she knelt to clean up the mess. "Maybe you should stick to what you're good at," he continued, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Wouldn't want you hurting yourself thinking too hard." Another student joined in. "Can you even read what's written on these papers?" she asked, pointing to a discarded economics assignment. "That's some pretty advanced stuff there." Elaine said nothing as she gathered the fallen trash. The economics homework the girl pointed to covered topics she'd aced in her own class last semester. Her fingers itched to point out an error in the calculations, but she kept silent. "Hello, do you understand English?" the first student asked, waving his hand in front of her face when she didn't respond. "Yes, sir," Elaine said quietly, continuing her work. She'd learned long ago that arguing only made situations worse. "Yes, sir," mimicked another student. "At least she knows her place." They laughed again, watching as she finished cleaning up. Elaine felt their eyes on her back, judging her uniform, her work, her very existence. They had no idea who she really was. When she was done, Elaine pushed her cart toward the door, wanting nothing more than to escape their cruel laughter. But as she reached the exit, she heard the boy in the designer sweater make one final comment. "Imagine spending your whole life cleaning up other people's messes," he said. "What a waste of time on this earth." The words hit Elaine like a physical blow. She gripped the handle of her cart so tightly her knuckles turned white. For a moment, she considered turning around, walking back to their group, and telling them exactly who she was and what she'd accomplished. Instead, she pushed through the door and headed to the staff locker room. Her shift was over, and she had 20 minutes to change before her advanced financial planning class began on the other side of campus. In the empty locker room, Elaine opened her bag and pulled out fresh clothes and her economics textbook. The worn cover had been carefully wrapped in a protective plastic sleeve. Inside, complex formulas and theories were highlighted and annotated in her neat handwriting. Notes filled the margins. As she changed out of her gray uniform into a simple blouse and slacks, Elaine thought about the students' comments. Their words had stung, yes, but they also strengthened her resolve. Soon they would know. Soon everyone would know. She tucked her student ID into her pocket, not the staff one that identified her as E. Johnson, Custodial Services, but the one that read Elaine Johnson, Economics Department, Honors Program. 10 minutes after leaving the student center, Elaine looked like a completely different person. Gone was the gray janitor's uniform. She now wore a simple navy blouse and black pants, nothing fancy, but clean and professional. Her hair, freed from its tight work bun, was pulled back into a more flattering style that framed her face. She hurried across campus, taking the long route around the library instead of cutting through the quad. The last thing she needed was to run into those students again. As she walked, the weight of their words still hung heavy in her mind, but another feeling was taking over: determination. The economics building stood tall at the north end of campus. Unlike the older buildings where Elaine usually cleaned, this one was modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows and bright lights. She took a deep breath before pulling open the glass door. Inside, the atmosphere changed immediately. Here, nobody stared through her. Here, she was somebody. "Evening, Miss Johnson," called Professor Rivera from his office doorway. "Ready for tonight's discussion on investment strategies?" "Yes, sir," Elaine answered, but this time her voice carried confidence. "I've been thinking about your question from last week about retirement accounts for low-income families." The professor's eyes lit up. "I was hoping you would. Your perspective is exactly what this conversation needs." Elaine smiled, feeling the stress of her earlier shift melting away. She continued down the hallway, greeting other students with a nod or hello. Most were younger, traditional college age, but a few were older like her. None knew she had spent her day cleaning their classrooms and offices. In the lecture hall, Elaine took her usual seat in the second row. She liked being close enough to see everything, but not so close that all eyes would be on her. As she arranged her notebook and pens, all color-coded and perfectly organized, Other students filtered in. "Hey, Elaine," said a young woman sitting beside her. "Did you finish that insane problem set?" "Just barely," Elaine replied. "Number 5 had me stuck for hours." "Me too," the woman exclaimed. "How'd you solve it?" As Elaine explained her approach to the difficult economics problem, she couldn't help but think about the stark difference between this conversation and the one she'd endured hours earlier. Here, her brain was valued. Here, she was respected. Class began promptly at 7:00 p.m. While Professor Rivera launched into his lecture on advanced investment strategies, Elaine took careful notes. Her handwriting was small and neat, maximizing space on the page. Paper cost money, and Elaine didn't waste anything. When the professor posed a challenging question about market fluctuations, the room fell silent. After a moment, Elaine raised her hand. "The problem isn't just theoretical," she said. "When we look at how these policies affect real working families, we need to consider." She went on to explain her perspective, drawing on both her textbook knowledge and her lived experience. The professor nodded appreciatively. "Excellent point, Ms. Johnson. This is exactly the kind of real-world application we need to consider." A few students glanced at her with newfound respect. Elaine felt a warm glow of pride, but it was tinged with exhaustion. Her day had started before sunrise, and after class, she still had 3 chapters to read and a paper to edit before she could sleep. When class ended at 9:30 p.m., most students headed to their dorms or apartments. Elaine packed her bag methodically and walked to the campus bus stop. Tomorrow was Saturday, no classes, but she'd be working her second job at the grocery store from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Then she'd head to her third job doing weekend bookkeeping for a small plumbing business. On the bus ride home, Elaine fought to keep her eyes open. Her son would be waiting up, wanting to hear about her day. She never mentioned the rude students or the exhaustion. Instead, she would tell him about the economics problems she solved and the praise from her professors. "Education changes everything," she always told him. "Nobody can ever take it away from you." As the bus rumbled through the night, Elaine reviewed her mental calendar. Just 3 more weeks until graduation, 3 more weeks of this double life. Then everything would change. The calendar on Elaine's fridge had the dates circled in red. May 15th, graduation day. Just 3 weeks away. Every morning, she looked at that circle while sipping her coffee, letting it fuel her through exhaustion. Today, though, even that circle couldn't lift her spirits. She'd been up until 2 a.m. finishing her final paper, only to wake at 4:30 for her cleaning shift. Her son had left her a note. "You got this, Mom." Almost there. Those 6 words kept her going as she dragged herself to campus. The day started like any other, emptying trash cans, wiping down surfaces, mopping floors. But when Elaine pushed her cart into the student lounge after lunch, she stopped cold in the doorway. The room was destroyed. Clearly, there had been a party the night before. Red plastic cups were scattered everywhere. Sticky patches of dried beer covered the floor. Food had been ground into the carpet. Someone had even written "Seniors Rueuli" in what looked like ketchup across one wall. Elaine sighed deeply. This would take hours to clean, and she had her final exam in Advanced Economic Theory at 4 p.m. She hadn't even had time to review her notes today. As she began picking up cups, she noticed something draped over a chair in the corner, a black graduation gown. She picked it up carefully. It was expensive, the kind sold at the campus bookstore for nearly $100. Someone had spilled red wine all over it, leaving a large stain down the front. Great party, wasn't it? Elaine turned to see the same group of students who had mocked her weeks earlier, lounging in the doorway. "We really sent the semester out with a bang," said the tall one in the designer clothes. He glanced around the destroyed room without a hint of remorse. Another student noticed the ruined gown in Elaine's hands. "Oh, that's mine," said a girl with expensive highlights. "Just throw it away. Daddy already bought me another one." She waved her hand dismissively. But Elaine started to speak, thinking of how long she'd saved for her own graduation gown. "But what?" The girl cut her off. "It's not like you need to worry about graduation gowns. Unless you're planning on cleaning the ceremony too." The group erupted in laughter. Elaine carefully folded the gown and placed it on a table. Her hands were shaking, not from anger, but from something deeper, a bone-deep tiredness of being unseen, unheard, underestimated. Seriously though, continued the tall boy, sprawling on a surprisingly clean section of couch, I can't imagine spending your whole life cleaning up after other people. What's the point? Some people just waste their lives, you know. His friends nodded in agreement, watching Elaine as she silently continued cleaning their mess. I bet she doesn't even understand what we're saying, another student whispered, not bothering to lower her voice enough. Probably didn't even finish high school. Elaine's perfect 4.0 GPA flashed in her mind. The recommendation letters from professors. The job offer she'd already received from a financial firm. The speech she was supposed to give at graduation. For a moment, she considered telling them everything. Instead, she focused on scrubbing the ketchup letters from the wall, her back to the students so they wouldn't see the tears in her eyes. After they left, laughing about some party later that night, Elaine sank into a chair. For the first time in her educational journey, she wondered if it was worth it. Maybe she should just skip the graduation ceremony altogether. Why put herself through that? She could still get her degree, still take the job she'd been offered. She pulled out her phone and texted her advisor, Professor Williams, "Can we meet?" thinking about not walking at graduation. His response came quickly, "My office, 3 p.m. And whatever you're thinking, reconsider." Elaine looked around at the trashed room. She had 1 hour to clean this mess, meet with the professor, and then take her final exam. Her head pounded with fatigue. The red graduation gown seemed to mock her from the table. So much work, so much sacrifice, and for what? To be laughed at one final time? She picked up her cleaning supplies and got back to work, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. Elaine knocked softly on Professor Williams' office door at exactly 3 p.m. Despite the chaos of the day, she was never late. "Come in," called a warm voice from inside. She stepped into the familiar office lined with books from floor to ceiling. Professor Williams, a kind-faced man in his 60s, looked up from his computer. "Elaine," he said, his smile fading when he saw her red-rimmed eyes. "Sit down. What's going on?" She sank into the chair across from him, suddenly too tired to maintain her usual strong front. "I don't think I should walk at graduation," she said quietly. The professor leaned back in his chair, waiting for her to continue. "It's just, these students, they have no idea who I really am. They laugh at me every day." Her voice cracked. "Today they destroyed the student lounge and told me to my face that people like me waste their lives, that I probably didn't finish high school." She told him about the ruined graduation gown, the cruel comments, the constant disrespect. "And you know what's worst?" she continued. "Part of me believes them. Who am I to stand up there in a cap and gown? I'm just the cleaning lady." Professor Williams removed his glasses and placed them carefully on his desk. "Elaine Johnson," he said firmly, "I have taught at this university for 32 years. In all that time, I have never, and I mean never, had a student with your combination of intelligence, work ethic, and perspective." He pulled a folder from his desk drawer. "This is your final paper. I've already graded it. Another perfect score." Elaine stared at the folder but didn't reach for it. "You have maintained a 4.0 GPA while working 3 jobs and raising a son. You've done what most of those kids couldn't dream of doing with all their privilege and resources." The professor leaned forward. "If you don't walk at graduation, you're not just cheating yourself. You're cheating everyone who needs to see what's possible." Elaine looked out the window at students crossing the quad, so carefree. "I'm just tired of being invisible," she whispered. "Then stop being invisible," Professor Williams replied simply. "You've earned this, Elaine, more than anyone I know." She thought about her son, how his eyes lit up whenever she brought home in a paper, how he told his friends his mom was going to be a financial genius, how he'd already asked to borrow her cap and gown for a photo to put on his desk. "There's something else you should know," the professor said, interrupting her thoughts. "The university president reviewed academic records for graduation honors. Your perfect GPA and extraordinary circumstances caught his attention." Elaine looked up, confused. "He wants to recognize you specially at the ceremony." "I don't know exactly what he's planning, but it's unprecedented," he smiled. "That is, if you decide to attend." The weight that had been crushing Elaine's chest all day began to lift slightly. She thought about the students who had mocked her, how shocked they would be to see her in a cap and gown instead of a cleaning uniform. For years, she had hidden her studies, kept her head down, accepted invisibility. Maybe it was time for that to change. "I need to think about it," she said finally. Of course, the professor handed her the graded paper. "But remember, Elaine, sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply claim our place in the world, unapologetically." She nodded, gathering her things for her final exam. That night, Elaine sat at her small kitchen table long after her son had gone to bed. In front of her lay two items: her worn employee badge and the graduation ticket that had arrived in the mail that day. 8 years of early mornings and late nights. 8 years of being looked through as if she were made of glass. 8 years of dreaming about a better future. She picked up her phone and took a deep breath. Then she called her mother in Tennessee. "Mama," she said when the familiar voice answered, "I need you to come up for my graduation in 3 weeks. I've decided to walk." Her mother's joyful cry brought tears to her eyes. "And Mama," she added, "bring your nicest dress. I think it's going to be special." Graduation day arrived with perfect blue skies. Elaine woke before her alarm, too nervous to sleep. Today, everything would change. For once, she wasn't wearing her gray uniform. Instead, she put on a simple blue dress she'd found on sale months ago and saved for this exact day. Her son helped dip it up. "You look beautiful, Mom," he said, his eyes shining with pride. Elaine's mother fussed with her hair in the tiny bathroom. "Hold still, baby girl. This is your big day." The campus looked different today. Colorful flowers lined the walkways, and chairs were set up on the main lawn. Families in their Sunday best streamed toward the ceremony area, carrying flowers and balloons. Elaine's hands trembled as she separated from her family. "You two find your seats. I have to go line up with the other graduates." Her mother squeezed her hand. "We'll be watching. Your daddy would be so proud." Behind the main building, hundreds of students in black gowns gathered. Elaine clutched her own gown, still in its protective plastic. She spotted the group of students who had mocked her in the student lounge. They were laughing, taking photos, adjusting each other's caps. They didn't notice her. A staff member handed out name cards. When she reached Elaine, she did a double take. "Oh, you work in?" "I didn't realize." "Yes," Elaine said simply. "I work in custodial services, and today I'm graduating summa cum laude with a degree in economics." The woman blinked in surprise, then smiled warmly. "Well, congratulations." As they lined up alphabetically, Elaine slipped her gown over her dress and placed the cap on her head. The girl behind her helped straighten her tassel. "I'm so nervous," the girl whispered. "Me too," Elaine admitted. Strange how the cap and gown made them equals today. The ceremony began with a processional. One by one, the graduates marched to their seats as proud families cheered. Elaine spotted her son and mother in the crowd, waving wildly. Her heart swelled. The university president stepped to the podium, a tall woman with silver hair. "Welcome to Westfield University's commencement ceremony," she began. "Today we celebrate achievement, perseverance, and transformation." Elaine barely heard the opening remarks. Her mind was racing, thinking about the past 8 years. The early mornings, the late nights, the textbooks hidden in her cleaning cart, the tests taken on no sleep. It had all led to this moment. "Before we begin awarding degrees," the president continued, "I want to recognize an extraordinary member of this year's graduating class. Every year, we honor the student with the highest academic achievement. This year's honoree has maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA while overcoming obstacles that would defeat most of us." The crowd grew quiet. This student completed her degree while working 3 jobs. She attended classes at night after working full days. She raised a son as a single mother. And she did all this while maintaining the highest academic standards in our economics department. Elaine's heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's summa cum laude graduate with the highest GPA in Westfield University's history is Elaine Johnson. A spotlight found her in the sea of black gowns. The crowd erupted in applause as Elaine stood on shaky legs. Near the front, she saw the students who had mocked her. Their mouths hung open in shock. The tall boy in designer clothes squinted at her, confused recognition dawning on his face. "Ms. Johnson," the president continued, "would you please join me at the podium?" Elaine walked forward, feeling hundreds of eyes on her. As she climbed the steps to the stage, she caught sight of her son, jumping up and down with excitement. "As our top graduate, Ms. Johnson has earned the honor of addressing her fellow students," the president announced, stepping aside. Elaine approached the microphone, her hands gripping the sides of the podium. The faces before her were a blur. Some were smiling. Some looked confused. The group of students who had mocked her sat frozen in disbelief. She took a deep breath and unfolded the speech she'd practiced for weeks. "Good morning," she began, her voice stronger than she expected. "Many of you are seeing me for the first time today, but I've been seeing you for 8 years. A hush fell over the crowd as Elaine's words hung in the air. "Many of you are seeing me for the first time today, but I've been seeing you for 8 years. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Some looked confused. Others were beginning to understand. "For most of you, I was invisible," she continued. "I was the woman who emptied your trash cans, who mopped your floors, who cleaned up the messes after your parties." In the third row, the tall boy in designer clothes sank lower in his seat, recognition dawning on his face. "I'm not sharing this to make anyone feel bad," Elaine said, her voice steady. "I'm sharing this because sometimes we look right through people without seeing them. We make assumptions about what they know, what they're capable of, based on the job they do or the clothes they wear." She smiled at her son, who was beaming with pride. "I started working here as a janitor 8 years ago because this job offered tuition benefits. My dream was to get an education that would help me create a better life for my family. That dream kept me going through 4 a.m. alarm clocks, through nights of studying after everyone else was asleep, through moments when I wasn't sure I could keep going." Elaine took a deep breath. "I want to thank the people who saw me. Professor Williams, who never treated me differently when he found out I was on the custodial staff. My fellow students in night classes, who welcomed me. And all at the security desk, who always had a kind word." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But I also want to thank those who didn't see me. Yes, it hurt when students laughed at me or assumed I couldn't read their textbooks. But that hurt pushed me to work harder, to prove something, not just to them, but to myself and to my son." From her pocket, she pulled out 2 small objects, her employee ID badge and her student ID card. "For 8 years, I carried both of these, 2 identities on one campus. Today, I'm proud to say I don't need to hide anymore." Tears shimmered in her eyes, but her voice remained strong. "After today, I'll be starting a new job at a community financial center. I'll be helping families like mine learn about saving, investing, and building wealth, and I'll also be teaching one night class right here at Westfield, helping other students who might be struggling to find their path." The crowd erupted in applause. Even the university president wiped away a tear. "I want to leave you with this thought," Elaine said when the clapping died down. "Every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Every person has dreams, struggles, and abilities that might surprise you, so look people in the eye. Learn their names. Treat everyone with respect, not because of what they might secretly be, but because of who they already are." With a final thank you, she stepped away from the microphone to a standing ovation. As she returned to her seat, students reached out to touch her arm, to congratulate her. Professor Williams gave her a thumbs up from the faculty section. After the ceremony, as graduates hugged their families and took photos, Elaine stood with her son and mother, proudly holding her diploma. A group of students approached hesitantly, the same ones who had mocked her in the student lounge. "Ms. Johnson," said the tall boy, his voice quieter than she ever heard it. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry." Elaine looked at him, really seeing him for the first time, not as an entitled rich kid, but as a young person with his own insecurities and journey ahead. "Thank you," she said simply. "What will you do after graduation?" He seemed surprised by the question. "I'm supposed to work at my father's company, but," he trailed off. "But what?" she asked. "But I don't think that's what I really want." Elaine nodded. "Then today is a good day to start being honest about who you are and what you want from life." 3 months later, Elaine sat at her desk at the community financial center she'd helped establish. Photos of her graduation day lined the wall alongside her framed diploma. a stack of financial literacy workbooks she'd developed sat ready for that evening's class. Her phone buzzed with a text from her son, "Proud of you every day, Mom." As she put down her phone, her assistant poked her head in. "Your 2 o'clock is here, Miss Johnson." Elaine smiled as her next client walked in, the tall boy from graduation, ready for advice on starting his own nonprofit. "Have a seat," she said. "Let's talk about your future."